Hi there, I'm Renos Vakis, lead economist at the World Bank, and your host for Accelerating Development, Ideas for Impact. This is not your typical podcast. It's an AI-powered conversation brought to you by the World Bank Institute for Economic Development, where we unpack the latest research with one goal in mind, turning big ideas into real-world impact. Let's get started.
Thanks for the introduction, Renos. On our show today, we're taking a focused look at global value chains. You probably know them as GVCs. For policymakers, for professionals trying to navigate today's economy, well, understanding these international production networks is, frankly, it's absolutely key. We've basically boiled down the insights from a pretty in-depth report, and our goal here in this deep dive is to pull out maybe 2 or 3 really critical things about GVCs that should be right there on your radar.
Exactly. And what makes GVCs different, from just traditional trade is how production gets split up across different countries. So instead of one country making the whole thing, you have different places specializing in specific tasks. Each step adds value along the way. It's not just like buying and selling finished goods. It's a much more integrated kind of process.
Okay, let's jump into our first highlight then. The report really makes a strong case, I think, for GVCs as a powerful driver for economic progress. The main point, participating in these networks, it seems, offers significantly more potential for development, for poverty reduction, than just standard trade.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is how it does that. The report points to a couple of key things about GVC trade. One is this idea of hyper-specialization. So countries get incredibly focused on just, narrow slices of production. Think less about making the whole car, more about being the world's best at making, say, a specific component for the engine. And the other really crucial bit is these durable, long-term relationships between firms in different countries. These aren't just one-off deals. They're like sustained partnerships. And that helps spread technology, share knowledge, maybe even access capital.
Right, so it's deeper than just buying and selling, and there are numbers to back this up, aren't there?
Oh, definitely. The report estimates that just a 1% increase in a country's GVC participation, that can boost per capita income by more than 1%. Compare that to standard trade, where the gain is maybe around 0.2%. So it's a big difference.
Wow, okay, more than 5 times the impact. That's quite something. And you mentioned real-world examples.
Absolutely. We've seen countries like Bangladesh, Cambodia, Vietnam achieve really impressive growth by shifting essentially from just exporting commodities to becoming key parts of manufacturing GVCs. The garment industry is a classic example, right? Using imported textiles to make clothes for export.
A 20% jump in 3 years? That's incredible acceleration. The report also talks about firms that both import and export within these chains, right? They seem pretty central.
They really are. They're the linchpins, connecting the dots across borders. Makes sense they be dominant. And it's not just about overall growth. It links to poverty reduction, too. There's evidence from Mexico, from Vietnam, showing the areas with more of these deeply integrated GVC firms, they saw bigger drops in poverty compared to places with just simple exporters or importers.
Okay, so the message here for you, our listener, the policymaker, is pretty clear then. GVC integration isn't just another trade strategy. It could be a really powerful tool for growth and for tackling poverty.
That's the first big takeaway, yeah. But the second area we should look at is how things are changing. The GVC landscape isn't static. The report does note that the really fast expansion we saw back in the 90s and early 2000s, well, that's slowed down a bit since the 2008 financial crisis. Lower global growth, less investment, maybe a lack of big new liberalization deals, factors like that.
And there are new things emerging too, right? Things that could really shake up GVCs.
For sure. The report flags stuff like 3D printing, the potential there to maybe bring some production closer to consumers. Less need for some of that long-distance shipping, potentially less demand for certain types of labor.
Interesting. And what about trade tensions? We hear a lot about that.
Yeah, that's a big one. The risk of trade conflicts between the big players. That could definitely lead companies to rethink their supply chains. We might see GVCs becoming more regional, maybe fragmenting a bit, just because of tariffs and all-day uncertainty.
So for developing countries that are maybe hoping to use GVCs to climb the ladder, get technology, does this make things harder? Is that path still as open as it was? Or could these changes actually make it tougher for some countries to plug in and benefit?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's something policymakers really need to think about. Because while the report shows the clear benefits historically, it also admits these chains can, worsen inequality or cause environmental issues if they aren't managed well. And right now, a really practical issue is these tariffs popping up in major markets. They might be aimed at protecting high-value jobs at home, but they could actually hurt processing activities in developing countries, especially in sectors like apparel, leather goods, the more labor-intensive stuff.
It sounds like a real balancing act. You want the benefits, but there are these new hurdles and potential downsides. The report mentions other things too, like complicated rules of origin in trade deals or subsidies distorting competition.
Exactly. And even in services which are increasingly important for GVCs, think logistics, liberalization hasn't moved that fast, especially in key areas like transport.
Okay, so connecting this back again for policymakers, you really need to be aware of these shifts. The old playbook might need some updates.
Definitely. Crafting smart trade policy, smart industrial policy, it means keeping a really close eye on how these global dynamics are evolving to make sure GVC engagement stays, fruitful.
Right. So, given this changing picture, what can governments actually do? What are the policy levers the report points to for making GVC participation work? It says just having cheap labor or resources isn't enough, right? Policy matters a lot.
Absolutely critical. National policies really shape how those endowments, like labor resources, actually plug into GVCs. The report stresses things like getting rid of barriers to investment, making sure labor costs stay competitive. That means avoiding, say, an overvalued exchange rate, which can kill manufacturing competitiveness. For example, the report notes that in Trinidad and Tobago, an overvalued currency kind of held back manufacturing.
Still fundamental, both for selling your part of the product and for getting the components you need cheaply. Peru, for example, cut tariffs unilaterally. That lowered import costs and helped them diversify exports within GVCs. And of course, preferential trade agreements like the ones benefiting Bangladesh have been really key entry points for many countries.
Okay. Investment climate, trade openness. What else? Logistics seem to come up a lot.
Hugely important, and maybe sometimes overlooked. Trade facilitation logistics, the report is clear. Delays at the border, slow shipping, they act just like tariffs. It's a real cost, especially for complex products, perishables, or time-sensitive stuff like fashion. There's a stat in there, in Africa, just one extra day of delay can cut trade by over 1%. That's significant.
Wow, 1% per day. That adds up incredibly fast. And there's a difference between countries here too.
Oh, a big difference. You look at countries deep in innovative GVCs, their import times might be under, say, 9 days. Then you look at some commodity-dependent countries, and import times can be over a month.
Think about Ghana or Iraq in some cases mentioned. Infrastructural gaps, lack of electronic customs systems, these things really bite, especially in places like Africa.
So fixing ports, customs, roads, that's not just infrastructure, it's core trade policy for GVCs.
Precisely. And one final piece, institutions. Good governance matters. Things like reliable contract enforcement, especially vital for GVCs. You're relying on partners across borders. Sectors that need strong contracts tend to grow faster in GVCs if the country actually has good, reliable institutions.
Okay, so summing up this part for policymakers, focus on the business environment. That means cutting red tape, yes, but also actively tackling trade barriers. Tariffs, sure, but also these non-tariff ones, the logistical bottlenecks. And underpinning it all is strengthening institutions, rule of law. That seems key to attracting and really benefiting from GVCs.
That's a great summary. I mean, the potential is there. GVCs offer a lot. But navigating it, especially now, it takes smart, proactive policy. Prioritizing that trade facilitation, keeping factor markets competitive, building strong institutions, that seems to be the recipe.
So, lots to think about, and maybe a final thought for everyone listening. As the world gets even more interconnected through these GVCs, how do national policies strike that balance? The balance between grabbing the benefits of global integration while also managing domestic challenges like inequality or potential disruptions. Something to chew on. Over to you, Rinos.
Thank you for joining us. You can find the full report on our website. Just follow the link in the description. Be sure to subscribe to be the first to know about upcoming episodes. And before you go, how do you plan to put what you learn into practice? And what topics you'd like us to explore next? We'd love to know. Until then, goodbye.